Please welcome our speaker tonight, and it's my honor to introduce my favorite speaker in the whole world, my good friend and sponsor, Rachel.
It is a bitch being 4'11" in a 5'7" world. Now that I've rearranged the environment, we can get started. As a speaker, I have two pet peeves. One of them is when the speaker goes over, and I have my own timer. The other one is when a speaker is a member of many 12-step fellowships, and they bring their other program in here, and it pisses me off. Because to me, it's disrespectful to AA, and it's disrespectful to the newcomers. And I'm not going to do it. Even though I'm a card-carrying member of 7 other 12-step fellowships beside this one. Because this disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful, as it says in the big book, and my husband says patient, and I say sneaky, I was not able to get all things in AA. But this is where it all started. I want to welcome the new people. My hope is that if you haven't found an answer to your drinking problem, that you may find an answer here. Even if I never raised my hand as a newcomer, I still had to go through those first couple hours, couple days, couple weeks, couple months. And this is a place where the solution was able to find me. One of the things that I do is that in many meetings when they do the serenity prayer, is in the silence, I dump my problem du jour in the middle of it, and then I spend the rest of the meeting with an open mind listening for the solutions and the answers to those problems. And because my higher power speaks through the mouthpiece and voice piece of the people that are in the meetings, I always get my answers. Maybe not right away, because my problems are not lightweight. I came in here having no living skills. I had no backbone when I came in here. You would not see me up at this microphone 22 years ago. I was a scared rabbit and I hid in the back of the room. But ultimately I got changed as a result of being here. I also want to congratulate the chip takers. It's a big deal. I remember my 60-day chip. I was at the West Side Alano Club, and the chip person had run out of chips, and I was bummed. And one of the gals who had 90 days sobriety, she had this keychain. You know how like maintenance men have all these keys on their ring? She had all her chips on the ring, you know. And if you go to 2 or 3 meetings a day for a whole, weeks on end, I mean, that's a lot of chips. So she whipped off her 60-day chip. I'm telling you, this thing was rubbed. It looked like it had been chewed on. It looked like it had been used to, like a screwdriver. It had been through the ringer. And the bottom line was that chip meant more to me than a brand new one out of a chip box. And that's how we keep what we've got, is we give it and we pass along to other people. The other chip that meant a lot to me was 18 months sober. Now, we don't give 18-month sobriety chips in AA. In other fellowships, they do. So I was 18 months sober. I was at the Birch Street. I think that's in Hermosa Beach. And I was there for the morning meeting, and I was bummed because they didn't have an 18-month chip. So one of the old-timers who had something like, 35 years of sobriety, which was longer than I had been alive, and he cut out the bottom of a styrofoam cup, put 18 months on it and said, keep coming back, put a hole in it, went through the chip box, with a little beaded keychain, and handed me my 18-month chip. That was cool. I remember those 2 chips. It's not easy getting sober, but when you got a lot of people rooting for you and believing in you and pulling that kind of stuff, with giving you what you need, with having been there and being the beacons, It's possible. It really is possible. And congratulations to the birthday people. I wish you many, many, many more candles, including my husband. And I can tell you he's come a long way, baby. But this is not Al-Anon, so I will leave that alone. Our format is, in a general way, we talk about what was like, what happened when we came to AA and got changed as a result of work in the program, and what our life is like now. Now, I was one of these people that started out as a moderate drinker. I could take it or leave it. I could leave alcohol in the glass. I could walk away. I didn't go through personality changes. No big deal. Unfortunately, I didn't stay that way because I progressed to a hard drinker where the habit impaired my working life and my relationships. And then 5 years before I crawled into AA, I crossed over the line, and the mere thought of drinking, and I didn't quit until I ran out or I passed out. It was very disconcerting to me why in the world my drinking had changed and why I could not continue to drink as I had been for about the first 21 years of my life. I grew up in Philadelphia. I was born there, raised for the first 18 years of my life, did a geographic and went to Boston for 5 years, and that's when I turned into hard drinking. And then I married an alcoholic, and together we did a geographic and came out to Los Angeles. He was an alcoholic. He could not go into a bar and have a drink. I could. He would go through personality changes before he was going to pick up the first drink. I did not. And I didn't understand this. And I have to tell you that I had an arrogant attitude. I felt very superior. But I got my comeuppance a bunch of years later when I lost complete control. And to me, losing control is like being pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not. Okay? So if you have lost control even a little bit, you have lost control. And the nasty part of this disease is there's not going to be a time when you're going to get that control back. Science may one day accomplish it, but it hasn't done so yet. And thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous, because otherwise we go off into oblivion. No longer is it a case that here and there are spiritual phenomena where people can get sober. Now it's wholesale. It's freely given, but that doesn't mean you can get it by osmosis. You have to work for it. And I've been willing to work very, very hard for it. I did not believe when I came into AA that I could quit drinking. I had already tried every imaginable remedy to control how much I was doing, to control when I was doing it, and how often I was doing it, and I wasn't successful. And then I tried to quit completely, and I wasn't successful at that either. If the stuff called to me from the from the cabinet, it was all over. I didn't quit until I ran out or I passed out. And again, I didn't understand what the problem was because that's not the way that my drinking was when I first started out. And it was very confusing. Other people will tell stories and they were alcoholic from the get-go. My father had passed away in 1982. We went to Hawaii in '79 for like a family reunion. And that's when my drinking became alcoholic. I didn't stop until I ran out or passed out. My father called me a goddamned alcoholic on the way back to the airport. He was going to Philly, I was coming back to LA. And I didn't know what that was, but I didn't like the sound of it. And he said that he knew that I was an alcoholic because I had charged all my drinks to the room and he had paid for it. Now that shut me up for about 10 seconds when I thought about all the drinks that he didn't know about. Being female, all I had to do was wiggle my bottom and bat my baby browns, and I'd get drinks paid for me. So there were a lot of drinks that didn't show up on that bar bill, and it scared me. And I stayed sober on fear for a little while. And if I had continued just to have a hard time with alcohol, and I could stop if given a sufficient reason, that would have been the end of story, and I wouldn't have been standing up here talking to you. But the problem was that as I had spent some time with a secretary that I shared a secretarial bay with, I was working in a law firm, And all the partners were on a retreat, and all the associates that had their wits about them took a sick day that day. And a few of them, were still in the office on billable hours. But she and I went down to the garage. This was the Twin Towers in Century City. And went down to F level at that time. What is it now, 4 or 5? And she pulled out a cooler that had wine in it and cocaine and pot. And I completely forgot about the fact that my father had called me a goddamned alcoholic. It hadn't even come to mind. And that's the problem with this disease. It'd be fine if I could carry the thought all the way through to the drink, like I hear a lot of people talk about, but that's not the kind of alcoholism I had. I didn't even have to think about it, and I would have a drink to my lips. And so that's pretty much why I had given up. I recognized that the drinking was a problem. And what I did was, the only thing I could think of to do was to start playing around with this thing and trying to control it. So I figured I was only going to drink on Saturday night. I started on Friday night, all day Saturday, Saturday night, all day Sunday, Sunday night. That experiment did not work. So I was only going to drink on the weeknights, and I was only going to do it after I got done my nightly chores. I was drinking in my car before I left the parking garage. I was drinking in the bathroom in the office before I even got down to the parking garage. That experiment did not work. So I thought, okay, I'm only going to drink at 12 noon. When I found myself drinking at 9 o'clock in the morning, I rationalized it was 12 noon in New York. That experiment did not work. I had tried divvying up all over the house, little small amounts. The problem is that there's no transference of memory when you're drinking to when you're straight. So if you're sober and you want to remember where you hid something when you're drinking, you're not going to remember. So I wrote out a map and instructions. The next time I was sober, I couldn't read what I wrote. So I typed it up. I could read it. I couldn't make any sense out of it. It wasn't working. So the bottom line was that experiment failed. I tried only drinking at other people's houses or parties, and I was complaining there wasn't enough parties going on around town. When I thought that my next-door neighbor, who was my drinking and using buddy, was getting into my stash and my stuff, I brought it all home. And then I never left the house. I had pizzas delivered. The duck pond at that time no longer exists. It is now a veterinarian's office. They delivered. The only time I left the house was I was getting checks regularly from my father's estate, and I would walk down to the bank and deposit the checks. I went absolutely nuts being at home. So that experiment did not work. And all these little things that I tried was just bringing me much closer to realizing that I could not quit. There was one of those strange blank spots where I had gone up to Lake Arrowhead. I was also in school at that time. And just out of the blue, I stopped drinking. I don't know what I did. I don't know what was going on. I couldn't repeat it, but it didn't happen. I studied for a test. I studied for it sober. I took it sober. I passed with flying colors, surprise, surprise. And when we got the grades, a couple of people in the class said, why don't we go down to Brennan's Pub, was down the street from the school. Did I stop to think about what was going to happen if I picked up the next drink? No, it hadn't even come to mind, and I was off and running. For the next 3 or 4 months before I crawled into AA, I didn't draw another sober breath. I had already admitted that my life was unmanageable and I was not capable, that I was powerless over alcohol, although I didn't put it in those words. And I said, I just can't stop. So I had already taken step 1 by the time I got here, but that was not enough to get me sober. I came to meetings the first 3 weeks of October of 1984 drunk. My next-door neighbor would show up with a meeting directory in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other hand and a cigarette case full of freshly rolled joints because mine fell apart. And we drink and we get high. We figure out where to go to a meeting. We'd go to a meeting. We'd listen. We'd go back home. We'd drink and get high some more, and we'd talk about what we heard in the meeting. So much for anonymity. Except if I ran into those people again, I wouldn't know them from Adam. Again, because there's no transference of memory, from drunk to sober. So I didn't even make the attempt to just not drink no matter what, or just go to meetings and don't drink between meetings. It wasn't an option. That wasn't the way that my alcoholism had progressed to. I didn't have any control over it. I had no choice, period. If you're able to stay sober between meetings, my hat's off to you, but that's not the kind of alcoholism that I ended up with. But even though I was drinking and still coming to meetings, this program is so powerful. The fellowship combined, 2 or more people together, with a power greater than ourselves as the ultimate authority, is so powerful that changes were already beginning to happen. And what was happening is that there was a spirit of love and acceptance and tolerance that I was not finding anywhere else. And I was willing to come back night after night after night after night after night. I didn't pretend that I was a newcomer. All I just did was I sat and I listened, and then we went home and talked about the meeting. I was 4 days sober before I realized that I had not had any alcohol and I had not had any drugs. And when I finally realized it, it shocked the hell out of me. And I knew that there was something very powerful to this thing, because I didn't even try to stop drinking. All I did was show up. And I think it was at the West Side Alano Club, and I took a chip for 4 days, and the whole room erupted in applause. And I didn't know why they were applauding, but, if they wanted to applaud, fine. Who am I to argue with it? But once I got to be sober and stay sober and watch the new people coming in, I understood why the room erupted in applause. They saw me coming in. I was hard to miss. We can tell a drunk person a mile away when they first come in, just like I could tell a sober person when I was drinking. I was scared to death of newcomers when I got here because they were too close to where I came from. So I hung out with the people that had 5 or more years of sobriety without knowing why that was the magic number. But because by the time that we get to be 5 years of sobriety, most of the alcohol, a good portion of the drugs, if that's part of your thing, is out of your system. And we begin to have a little bit of clarity. Now, between 1 month of sobriety and 5 years of sobriety, there's an awful lot of arrogance. We have got this thing going on. We have got it wired. But as my husband said, he's just now 19 years sober, and he's beginning to figure this thing out. But we need that little kitty cat arrogance, as I call it, in the first 5 years of sobriety. But hopefully not so much kitty cat arrogance that we ended up taking ourselves right out the door. And I've seen a lot of people go out at that point. And that's scary, because as the person who took a cake for 21 years had said, just because we're a long time sober doesn't mean that we're a long time away from the next drink. All that sober years mean, all those candles on the cake means that I've got sober experience. Now, sober experience is not what's going to keep me sober. What's going to keep me sober is to have my alcoholic mind in a state of neutrality, and I'm safe and protected from the thought of drinking. And how do I get that? By working the steps. Do the steps keep me sober? No. The steps do not keep me sober. The steps give me a way to forge a relationship with a power greater than myself, and it's that power greater than myself that keeps me sober. And what I have seen sometimes if people go out is when they lose hope and they lose faith and they lose that connection with that higher power, and they're screwed. Or they come in here with a prejudice or a bias against it. And I love one of the things about Alcoholics Anonymous that says, choose your own conception of God. And one of the things that a sponsor said to me when I got my first sponsor when I was 7 days sober. She took me down to the beach at Venice. She had an apartment down there. And she had me roll up my jean legs, my jeans, and I went into the water, and she said, "Do you feel the power in the water?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Can you stop that water from coming on the shore?" And I said, "No." She said, "That's a power greater than you, just so that you can feel it." And that had a hell of an impact on me. Now, there's a God of my understanding, and quite frankly, I don't understand it. But I know that power, and I know it's bigger than I am, and I know it keeps me sober, and the steps keep me clean enough where that relationship with that higher power is solid. I cannot afford the type of alcoholism that I have. I cannot afford a short circuit in that connection. I'm screwed if I do. I can never safely use alcohol again in any form. And for me, that form of alcoholism, alcohol takes many different forms. There's drugs, there's food, there's sex, there's relationships. There's a lot of different stuff because for me, the disease is cunning, baffling, powerful, patient, and sneaky. And this is it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. The first time I got taken through the steps in the AA Big Book was when I was 17 months sober. Before then, I got taken through the steps through the AA 12 and 12. The first inventory I wrote was all about what everybody did to me. Did it work? No. Did it help me? No. Because the steps in the AA 12 and 12 are not the program of action that's in the AA Big Book. And if you've got a severe alcoholism problem like I did, if there is no middle-of-the-road solution, it better be the Big Book or else. Service is not going to keep me sober. Sponsors are not going to keep me sober. Sponsees are not going to keep me sober. My husband is not going to keep me sober. And working the steps, for the most part, are not going to keep me sober, but they are going to keep me connected to that power greater than me. This man that took me through the Big Book, he knew the program backwards, forwards, upside down, inside out, and sideways, and he turned it on to me. He didn't give me an opinion of what the book said. He didn't give me an interpretation of what the book said. He showed me what the book said about itself. He got completely out of the way, which was really amazing for him because he had an ego the size of this room. If you saw him in a meeting, he was busy shoving this program down your throat. And if he had done it to me, I would have walked away. But he had been made very humble because he couldn't give this program away as badly as he wanted to because of the way that he was doing it. He was no different from Bill Wilson in the very beginning when he talked with Dr. Silkworth and said, you know, you've got to hit people hard with the disease aspect of this problem and stop preaching to them. And what happened was my sponsor was preaching to people. He did not preach. He simply showed me what the book said about itself. I was on fire with this program by the time I got done with the program, with the steps. It took me 3 weeks to go through all the steps, and it wouldn't have taken me that long except I balked on doing my 5th step. I hadn't been paying attention that there are 3 criteria for who you share intimate and confidential stuff. One of them is that the person is closed-mouthed, so that your stuff doesn't get all over the fellowship. The second thing having to do with that is that this doesn't come back as a weapon with the person that you're sharing it with. When I made a mistake of someone I chose as a sponsor when I was 10 years sober. The second criteria is that their understanding of what you're trying to do. You're trying to forge a relationship with a power greater than yourself. And you're sharing this stuff so that you stop living with your secrets. And the third thing is that they have to be unaffected by what you're sharing. There is nothing wrong with sharing parts of your story with one person and then parts of your story with someone else if you think that they're going to be affected by what you're sharing. We don't have the right to get sober at somebody else's expense. Bottom line. And so I balked on doing my 5th step because I didn't know about those 3 criteria. But my sponsor, being a male, refused to listen to my 5th step, and he said you had to find a woman to listen to it. And what had happened was I was not doing it, and I was at the West Side Alano Club one night, and there was a guy sharing from from the microphone that he wanted to go into detox and would someone take him. So somebody raised his hand and said that he would take him, and I got the nudge with a capital N that I should go along on that 12-step call. And I don't know why, but I had learned within the program not to question those nudges with the capital N. So we got in the car, and what I was doing is, because he had been in the program for a while, and then he went back out, and had been drinking for the last 3 years. So I did what the people in the big book had done, the pioneer members of AA. They worked with people, and they asked him why you went out and what was going on at the time. So I turned around and I asked him, he was in the back seat, what made you go out? And he said, I did a 4-step inventory and I didn't read it to anybody. And I said, holy shit. He lost his audience. I turned around in the car and the window was open a little bit, and I'm gulping in big breaths of air, freaking out. And I knew that my reprieve was running out. And there, by the grace of God, go I. So we took him to detox. That night, I had nightmares about all the people that I had written in the inventory. They were right here. And I was trying to scream, and there was no words would come out of it. And I knew that I was in deep trouble. So I got up at 4:30 in the morning, and I wrote another inventory. It was the same inventory that I had taken 3.5 days to write, except that what I had learned from that first inventory was that the cast of characters was changing, but the same events were happening over and over and over and over and over. I have listened to many 5th steps, and I got to tell you, we're not that clever. We're doing the same shit over again. The only thing we're doing is changing the cast of characters. So I wrote another inventory, and I just put down the patterns or the events that were going on, and then I just listed all the people that had to do with each event. It took me about 3 hours to write, and when I got done with it, I looked down my phone list. I called someone on the phone at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I asked her if she'd listened to my 5th step, and she said she'd be honored. And I didn't understand that. Why in the world would somebody be honored to listen to my shit? Well, after listening to other people's 5th step, it is an honor, because it's opening the door to someone having the ability to have freedom from this thing, to stop living with your secrets. The secrets are what'll kill us. We're people that live double lives. We show everybody else what we want them to see, but inside we know that we don't deserve the reputation, and it is enough to set up the conditions by which we'll drink again. It will shut off the sunlight of the spirit. I can't afford it. And I'm guessing that most of the people sitting in this room can't afford it. So I went and I read her my inventory. It took me an hour to do it because of the way that the format that I had done. And then I went up to the bathroom. God help me, in the West Side Alano Club. I got down on my knees, and I did my 6th and 7th. Then I got busy doing my 8th and 9th step, and while I was busy doing that, I got into doing my 10th step, and then I began working the steps through the 11th step every morning. It took a long time for those character defects to surface and to go away. I remember telling a person I had 6 months of sobriety. She had 4 months of sobriety, went to coffee, and I told her I didn't have any character defects. And I believed it. After doing a bunch of inventories, I got character defects. From the time that I was 18 months sober, when I finished going through the steps, and 3 months after my 5th sober birthday, I wrote 1,100 inventories. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you that so you say, look at me, aren't I special? I just want you to know this is no big deal. But I learned a hell of a lot about myself. I learned not only about my limitations, but also my strengths, my gifts, my talents, and my assets. And I'm supposed to be using those. When there are people that have weaknesses and problems in those areas, that's when I'm supposed to be using my gifts and my talents and my assets and my strengths for the benefit of other people. And when I have weaknesses and I have problems, I seek out the people who have the strengths in those areas. That's the proper way of using our gifts and talents and our character defects. I understood as a result of doing the 7th step that some of my character defects got neutralized. Some of them got reduced, some of them got eliminated, and it was none of my business what that was going to be, because that was up to my higher power. Some of my character defects, I need to remain humble, because I can have an ego the size of this room real easy. I don't want to go there, because my primary purpose is to fit myself to be of maximum service to the people around me and to God. And the only way that I can do that is to have a realistic assessment of what my problems are. And I can't help anybody else until I know what my problems are. One of the blessings that I've been able to help Lori with a lot of her stuff is because been there, done that. and I can see the pitfalls that are coming. But I also can't stop her from her own growth. I can't stop anybody from their own growth. I'm just a messenger. I don't carry the alcoholic. I carry the alcoholic message. That's my job. Today, I married, almost 11 years? 11 and a half years. Hey, I can't even remember the date of my wedding anniversary, okay? I know it's sometime in August. I have never been in one relationship for this long in my life. Why? Because of the traditions. We practice them in the house as well as the steps. We don't have any arguments. If we do, they're stupid things. He's much better than I am about making amends. He's taught me about making amends. But for the most part, I'm fairly easygoing, and I'm comfortable, and you know, it works. I started my own business. It's been kind of freaky. It's been kind of scary. My higher power is the senior partner, and I'm the junior partner. And sometimes I got to get on his case and say, you better start bringing some more people in here. I'm doing the footwork, but you got to pay the rent. And, you know, it's now almost 6.5 years down the road, and it's working. It's now beginning to start to take off. I'm comfortable in my own skin today. I don't do a lot of the same things that I used to do. I used to take people through the steps constantly. I don't have the patience. I don't have the energy for it. What I am is I'm an unofficial sponsor for a lot of people today. I don't do as much service as I used to do. When I was working out my program and my sobriety, that's when I was doing service. There is a difference between doing service instead of doing the steps, and then there is doing service when it wells up out of your 12-step work as a result of having worked the steps. And I much prefer the service that wells up out of me. I wanted to do this to finish up a few minutes before my time was up, and I've done it, which is what I wanted to do. If you're new, I hope you'll stay. We can only encourage you. This is a program of attraction. We don't tell you what to do. We don't promote it. If you want it, it's here, and we're happy to put our hands out to you. But if you don't, that's okay too. There is a statistic paragraph in the foreword to the second edition, and it says of those who really tried the program, 50% sobered up at once and remained that way. 25% sobered up after some relapses, and those who stayed on with AA had improvement. There is nothing in that paragraph that says anything about losers. So I don't care if you're coming in and out of here, you have something to teach us. I learned the most from the disease by the people that have come in and out and have the courage to come back. What my sobriety has taught me is about sober living experience. But how I learn about the disease is from the newcomers and for the people that struggle with this thing. It is possible to come in and stay in, but we're not going to throw you out if that's not your experience. And thanks for letting me share.